Have you ever noticed how your brain sometimes jumps to conclusions faster than a squirrel spotting a dropped cookie, even when it hasn't checked all the crumbs of information scattered around the situation? These sneaky shortcuts in our thinking are called biases, which are like invisible glasses your brain wears that slightly bend reality, making some ideas look bigger, louder, or more important than they truly are. Biases exist because your brain loves speed and efficiency, and instead of carefully examining every detail, it often grabs quick patterns and familiar stories to save energy. While these shortcuts can help you decide fast in emergencies, they can also trick you during everyday moments, especially when situations are complicated, emotional, or full of surprises. One common thinking mistake happens when your brain believes something just because it heard it many times, even if nobody ever stopped to check whether it was actually true. This kind of bias turns repeated ideas into truth-feeling ideas, which feel correct simply because they sound familiar, like a song you know all the words to but never questioned. Another sneaky bias appears when you only notice evidence that agrees with what you already believe, while quietly ignoring evidence that disagrees, as if your brain is hosting a very unfair talent show. This is called confirmation bias, and it loves comfort, because it allows your brain to stay cozy inside familiar beliefs without feeling challenged or confused. When confirmation bias takes over, your brain becomes a selective detective, spotlighting friendly clues while pretending the unfriendly ones do not exist. There is also a bias that makes the first piece of information you hear feel extra important, even if better information arrives later to politely knock on the door. This anchor bias ties your thinking to the starting point, like a balloon stuck to a heavy weight that refuses to float freely. Sometimes your brain assumes that if one thing is good or bad, everything connected to it must be the same, which is like deciding an entire pizza is terrible because one slice had too many olives. This halo effect bias paints everything with one color, even when reality is much more colorful and complicated. Another common mistake happens when your brain blames people for bad outcomes but excuses itself with reasons, creating a double standard that feels fair inside but looks strange outside. This bias makes it easier to judge others quickly, while giving yourself long explanations and second chances wrapped in sympathy. Your brain also tends to overestimate dramatic events, especially when they are emotional, surprising, or shown repeatedly, making rare things seem common and common things seem invisible. This availability bias turns flashy stories into giants and quiet facts into tiny whispers, even when the numbers disagree. Sometimes you may believe something is true just because many people around you believe it, which shows how powerful group thinking can be. This bandwagon bias invites your brain to jump aboard the loudest idea, even when it does not know where the train is heading. Another tricky bias causes your brain to believe that past successes guarantee future wins, forgetting that luck, timing, and changing conditions exist. This overconfidence bias makes your thinking feel strong and heroic, while quietly hiding possible mistakes under the rug. Biases also love emotions because strong feelings can act like wind pushing thoughts faster than logic can safely steer them. When you feel excited, scared, angry, or proud, your brain becomes more likely to trust quick judgments instead of calm reasoning. The tricky part is that biases usually feel right because they come from inside your own head, which makes them hard to notice. Your brain rarely announces, "Warning, bias activated," even though it probably should. Learning about biases does not mean getting rid of them completely because they are part of being human. Instead, the goal is to notice them, slow down, and question your thoughts like a curious detective asking polite but firm questions. When you pause and ask what evidence supports an idea, your thinking becomes clearer and more balanced. Asking whether another explanation might exist helps your brain stretch instead of snapping back to old habits. Listening to different viewpoints gives your thinking fresh air, even when those views feel uncomfortable at first. Admitting you might be wrong does not weaken your mind, but actually strengthens it, making it more flexible and honest. Biases shrink when curiosity grows because curiosity loves exploring instead of defending. Reasoning carefully helps biases lose their power especially when you combine patience, fairness, and humility. The more you practice noticing thinking mistakes, the better your brain becomes at adjusting course. This skill helps with schoolwork, friendships, online information, and big decisions that feel confusing. Thinking clearly does not mean thinking perfectly, because mistakes still happen. What matters is learning from them instead of repeating them proudly. When you understand common thinking mistakes, you gain a superpower that protects your thoughts. Your brain becomes less easily fooled and more capable of understanding complexity. Life stays interesting and mysterious, but it becomes less confusing and less unfair. By noticing biases, questioning assumptions, and staying curious, you begin to think with clarity, kindness, and confidence. And when your brain learns that habit, every idea gets a fair chance to be examined, instead of being judged by sneaky shortcuts hiding behind the scenes.